Most men believe their financial problems are about money. Wrong strategy, wrong timing, wrong market.
The financial problem is almost never about money. It is about the person handling the money.
How they respond to uncertainty, how they process loss, how they behave when the outcome is unclear and the pressure is real. I have watched Middle Eastern men with significant income produce almost nothing over decades. Not because they lacked intelligence, because every time a real financial decision arrived, the kind that required sitting inside discomfort without acting, something in them broke. They made the emotional decision, the one that relieved the pressure immediately, the one that cost them everything slowly.
This is not a conversation about motivation or discipline in the way those words usually get used. This is a precise diagnosis of
The majority of financial failure in men is not strategic. It is emotional. And until that is addressed at the root, address the root, then the strategy holds. Then the system holds. Then everything holds. Because the emotional architecture will override all of it. Every time. Emotional weakness in a financial context does not mean being sensitive. Does not mean having feelings. It means one specific thing. Emotionally weak men cannot hold positions. Not just investment positions. The inability to tolerate uncertainty, discomfort, When the discomfort of uncertainty reaches a certain threshold, the position gets abandoned. Not because the logic changed. The moments of highest discomfort in financial life are almost always the moments where the position is most important to hold. The market drops. The business goes quiet for 6 weeks. These are the exact moments when weakness produces action. The pain, in most cases, was temporary. The decision, in most cases, was permanent. This asymmetry, temporary emotional relief, purchased at the cost of permanent financial damage, and most men make it repeatedly, across years, without ever identifying it as the pattern. When uncertainty reaches a certain level, the brain activates what researchers call the relief reflex, a drive to resolve the ambiguity. Now you can see it, named and exposed. That is where the pattern ends. This reflex evolved because in most ancestral environments, ambiguity was dangerous. A business that will succeed in 3 years looks indistinguishable from a business that will fail for most of that 3 years. The emotionally weak response is to treat the discomfort of ambiguity as information, as a signal that something is wrong.
Instead of addressing his architecture, he changed the position, which meant he would face the same problem again.
The business is restructured. The investment is sold. The plan is abandoned. Emotionally weak men can go through multiple businesses, multiple investment strategies. There is a specific neurological event driving this pattern. Now you can see exactly what it is. Address the architecture, not the position. That is the different move. When the architecture is strong, the position gets held through the ambiguity. That is what changes. Let me name the 4 specific ways emotional weakness manifests in financial behavior. These are not abstract, these are... First, reactive spending. When emotional discomfort reaches a certain level, spending becomes This pattern, compounded over months, produces significant financial damage from hundreds of small decisions that individually seem trivial. Second, decision paralysis followed by panic action. He delays. He gathers more information. Third, external attribution. Every financial failure gets assigned to an outside cause, the market. This attribution error is catastrophic because it makes learning structurally impossible. Fourth, comfort-seeking over compounding. Every decision requiring present discomfort for compounding, the most powerful force in financial life, never gets access to enough capital or enough time to operate. 4 manifestations. 1 root. The emotional architecture beneath all of them. Address the root. All 4 change. That is the only intervention that holds. And they start to see something. Almost every significant financial reversal happened during a period of elevation.
It is not a gradual realization. It is usually a single event, a calculation. They sit down.
They realize they have been making financial decisions with their nervous system, not their strategy. And they realize, usually with a very specific quality of silence, that the problem was never. Most men, at this point, do one of 2 things. They sit with that realization long enough to let it change something. The ones who sit with it long enough are the ones whose financial trajectory changes, not because they found a better strategy. When you can observe the pattern from outside it, rather than operating from inside it, the gap opens. That calculation, sitting alone with 5 years of decisions honestly mapped, is the most valuable financial exercise most men will never do. The divergence begins at that single moment. Sit with it long enough. Or close the spreadsheet and continue. Sit with it. The correct problem is now identified. Everything that comes next builds from here. Not motivation, not motivation, not a better morning routine, not a stricter budget. Those are external structures applied to an internal. The real intervention is the deliberate, systematic development of what I call emotional capital. It requires learning to distinguish between 2 types of discomfort. Type 1, the position is actually wrong. The way you develop the ability to distinguish them is through deliberate exposure to type 2 discomfort without acting on it. That you can be uncomfortable and still be right. That uncertainty is not a signal to act. It is simply the texture of any position worth holding. Over time, this changes the relationship between discomfort and decision.
Patience. Real patience, not the performance of patience.
That patience is worth more than any strategy anyone has ever sold. Strategy without the emotional architecture to execute it is just a plan that will get abandoned the first time it becomes uncomfortable. Build the emotional capital. Hold the position through the discomfort. That is the intervention. Everything else follows. This video will make some men uncomfortable. Giving up that narrative requires confronting something harder, that the capacity was always there. The alternative, continuing the external attribution, continuing to change strategies while leaving the architecture intact, that the architecture was the problem, and that the architecture was built slowly, over years. The men who shift this pattern share one characteristic. They were willing to sit with the uncomfortable version of their own men who looked at the pattern clearly and decided that the discomfort of changing it was less expensive than the cost of continuing it. Not a strategy, not a system, a decision about which kind of discomfort you are willing to live with. The discomfort of changing, or the cost of continuing. That is the decision. The architecture examined. The decision made. The path forward from here. Your emotional responses are currently faster and more powerful than your financial intentions. When they conflict, the emotional response wins. Emotional weakness in financial life is not a character verdict. It is a structural description. It means one specific thing. This is not a permanent condition, but it is the default condition for most men operating without having deliberately built the emotional architecture. The financial world rewards, massively and disproportionately, the men who can hold positions. Every exit 6 months too early. Every business abandoned 3 months before the inflection point. The financial opportunity was not the variable. The emotional architecture was the variable. Build the architecture, not the strategy, not the information, not the motivation. The architecture. The strategy will only hold as long as you can hold it. And how long you can hold it has nothing to do with how intelligent you are.
That training starts with seeing the pattern clearly. You have seen it now. What you do next is the only thing that matters.
The pattern is seen. The decision is yours. Build the architecture.